The Gospel according to Luke 17:5 through 10. Jesus had warned the disciples about being a stumbling block and then reminded them of forgiveness. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who is just coming from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink? Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" The word of the Lord. Praise be to God.
That is not the word of the Lord we came here to hear today, is it? Well, all right. I'm trying to think of something for you to do, but I'm not going to go there. Oh, mercy. There's a monument in Hiroshima that is built to a young girl named Sadoko. I got to say her name right. She's not a puzzle you work on Sundays. She was 2 years old in 1945 when the atom bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. And she grew up very athletic. When she was 11 years old, during a track meet, she fell very ill and was diagnosed with leukemia, the disease that came to be called the atom bomb disease because so many young people, old people alike in Hiroshima, died from this disease following the war. And so Sadoko practiced an ancient art called origami, which is the folding of paper, making of paper figures. And she had been told by her friends that there was an ancient legend that the person who could make 1,000 paper cranes would be granted one wish. And so she set out at age 11 to make 1,000, and she indeed made 1,000 paper cranes in hopes that the gods would grant her health so that she could run again. Sadoko died in October of 1955 at 12 years of age. And when others heard her story, young people raised money across Japan to build this giant monument to her faith and to her hope. And today it is a common practice of children all over Japan to make paper cranes that they can give to institutions and to individuals as an offering of peace. At times, literally thousands of them hang from the trees around this monument. The amazing faith of one little girl that inspired so many. Well, I thought it would be kind of neat today if Shannon came up and did a visual. I wanted to talk to you about gifts today. And Shannon is an easy visual when we talk about gifts, okay? Because she is so gifted. She's so artistic. And so one of the things that, as I talk about her gifts that I want her to do, is to make a paper crane. You all know she can sing beautifully. You all take time to tell her that, and she appreciates it, I know. But she is so artistic that she can draw and sculpt and paint so many things. Take your time. I'm going to talk a while, so... I wanted her to... Yeah, it's on big paper, but we have to be able to see it. So take your time. While she does, I'm going to tell you another story about a friend of mine who was... he was diagnosed schizophrenic. In other words, he heard voices. And for those of you who are studying the Enneagram, they're not the same voices that we talked about if you're one. He heard voices, and so occasionally he had to be constrained in order for his own safety to be protected and for those around him. So from time to time he found himself in the mental hospital in Big Spring. And one day I was having coffee with him, and he told me a story about a particular time that he was being held in the mental hospital in Big Spring, and he said, you know, every time the attendants would come by during the week, I would tell them I'm going to church on Sunday. And they would say, sure, okay, yeah, knowing that he's not leaving the ward. But every day as they came by, he said, I'm going to church on Sunday. And finally Sunday came, and he told me this story. He said, I got out of bed, and I got dressed, and I put on my jacket, and I was ready for church. And he said, my room was at the end of this really long hall. And at the other end of the hall was this big, giant steel door designed to keep people inside the ward. And he said, there I was dressed for church, and I got down in the position at the end of the hall, and I took off running as fast as I could. And this guy's a pretty big fella, you know, think Wyatt size. And he's down, and he gets to the end of the hall, and he says, I threw my entire body against that big steel door. And I'm waiting. I'm on pins and needles, man. I'm like, yeah. And then he goes, and then I bounced off that door, and I landed on the floor. And he said it took about that long, and there were 3 attendants on me, and they had me subdued, and they had me in a straitjacket, and they took me back to my bed, and there they tied me to the bed, and I stayed the rest of the day. And I was speechless. And he broke the silence. He looked at me and he said, I didn't get to go to church that day. I said, well, I guess not. And he said, well, I wasn't supposed to. I said, you weren't supposed to? He said, no. If I was supposed to go to church, I figured the door would have opened. But the door didn't open, and so I wasn't supposed to go to church. I don't like the supposed to book, but I understand when people read from it. Sometimes I do that myself. And then he said the wisest thing that followed. He said, my part was just to run at the door. That's all I was called to do. And I thought in that moment, and I've thought ever since then, wow, isn't that what the church needs today? It's not people who know how to get it done, but people who are willing to just run at the door. Isn't that what your community needs right now where you live? Isn't that what your block needs? Isn't that what your school or your campus or this entire school system needs? Is people just willing to run at the door no matter what the results are. Isn't that what your life needs? Is this little fire inside of you that says, I know you feel defeated right now, and I know that you don't think you're going to win, and you may not, but can you just run at the door today? That's enough for today. Wow. Wouldn't it be nice if we had some people like that in Congress? They all ran for the door, but I'm not meaning to be political. You know, gifts are like that. We don't want the job we have. We don't want the gift we have. I don't want to run at the door. I want to be the guy on the other side of the door with the great, successful program. That's who I am. We want Shannon's gifts. I want to sing like her. I want to be able to make paper mache dolls when someone asks me to. Do you know that that's not really her gift? Oh, I know it's a talent and not everyone has it, okay? So if you can't sing like Shannon, it's okay. You can sing in the congregation. I like my friend Steve Smith always says to me, God gave me this voice, and for some reason he likes it. I don't. But you know, that's not a gift. A gift is something that God's given you, and Shannon has to work to develop that talent. If you want some gifts that are as simple as going to school and getting the education, going out in the world and getting the experience. Do you know what her real gift is? I can tell you. And you never would have figured this out. Her real gift to us as a body is this. She has this unique ability to help us know how to appreciate the flaws in people. She has the ability to help us appreciate the underappreciated or those who are completely overlooked. And do you know how she does it? By testifying to the pain all around us. That's how she does it. And she doesn't like it. She does not like it. But it's who she is. And it's what God has given her to share with us. And so over and over when I'm going, yeah, that Han Yawk should have done something different. It's their own fault. And she's like, no, you don't understand. They're such unique people. And they're just expressing themselves. And you don't appreciate them. I get that from her an awful lot because that's not my gift. So I want to talk to you about giftedness today. What is your gift? Are you trying to get somebody else's? I heard this great saying yesterday, be you because everybody else is taken, okay? And so we're looking around going, but if I could just, and we keep projecting. One day, a gentleman actually said to me, I can't be good like you. Well, I heard another great saying yesterday, the clergy are paid to be good. Lay people, they say, are good for nothing. So, see, going to team meetings gets me something. Maybe not great theology, but good jokes anyway. God bless. Look at that. Paper crane. He's perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Look at that. Now that's talent. Here, you have another gift. Give me a kiss. She has the gift of stroking my ego and making me feel special, by golly. Yeah. You can't get in the league, so I mean, I'm in debt, buddy. We project. My friend projected off onto me. If I could be good like you, and what I wanted to say was, you're a man just like I am. I fall down just like you. You're capable of all the same things that I am. But normally we have to look in our brokenness to find where we're gifted. Now that's a way that I can subdue this passage of Scripture and make it palatable. Because you came here today to hear that you're so special that God has counted even the hairs on your head. And some of you are growing more special with every year that goes by. And then Luke, who seems to always give us these terribly challenging passages, again, about throwing away money and hating our folks and man alive, what's Luke up to? And now, here you go. Just when I wanted to know that I was special and unique and God loved me so much, I'm now being told that I should consider myself as worthless as a slave. And that doesn't sound like God to me. I don't know about you. Brian McLaren says, what does he say? He said, from now on I don't say hear the word of the Lord. He says, I now say look for the word of the Lord in this reading. Where is it? Well, normally we preach from smaller passages, and if we learn to read around it, I tell you that all the time, and then we don't do it on Sunday. So I thought it would be kind of interesting, and I'm going to read from The Voice. It reads like a narrative, like a play, like a script. Before this passage happens, here's what Jesus is saying to his disciples. You can't stop temptations to do wrong from coming. But how tragic it will be for the person who becomes the source of the temptation. It would be better if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea than that he should offend one of these little ones. So each of you needs to be careful. Now, that didn't hurt much yet. But keep listening. Because, he says, if your brother or your sister sins against you, confront him about it. And if he has a change of mind and a change of heart, we heard this earlier, didn't we? From Janet. If he has a change of heart, a change of mind, then forgive him. Even if he wrongs you 7 times in a single day. If he turns back to you each time and says he's sorry and he will change, you must forgive him. Wow, That's terrible advice. How many times, I mean seriously, how many times do people come to the pastor to say, I'm in an abusive relationship? How many pastors would sit with any kind of liability at all and say to a battered spouse, go back and forgive him? Because how many times does the other spouse, and this is not a gender thing anymore. I mean, in my childhood it was the abusive male and the victimized woman, but it's prevalent in our society. Gender doesn't matter. But how many times would you say, go back to a dangerous situation and forgive? Because they always say, oh, I'm sorry, and I'm going to change. When you're dealing with addiction, I'm sorry, I'm always sorry, and I'm going to change. How many times in your own life, when you were dealing with what you thought of as your sin, and I will call your sinful behavior, how many times have you said, I'm going to change, I'm going to quit, I'm never going to do that again? If you haven't, I did it for you. And I said to God one night, I'm tired of forgiveness. I need healing. I don't want to repeat this behavior. And God simply said to me very quickly, Doug, do you get tired of my forgiving you? Yeah, I was ouchy. Jesus is talking about forgiveness. Well, the disciples, or here it says the Lord's emissaries, come back with the exact reply that you and I need to come back with, and it is this: we don't have enough faith for this. Did you ever want to say that? God, I understand what the preacher's saying about Jesus saying give something away, and if they steal it, let them have it. If they borrow it, don't resist it. If they strike you on the cheek, turn the other one. Man, all this stuff is difficult, Lord. I stopped cussing some, and I stopped drinking in public, and I stopped. and God, isn't that good enough? Isn't that good enough? But Lord, help me. It says here, we don't have enough faith for this. And then it says, help our faith to grow. And then Jesus says, pointing to a mulberry tree, it's not like you need a huge amount of faith. What? I just said I have a hard time with being a doormat, and people come to me saying, I'm never going to do it. Please forgive me. And you're telling me I got to forgive them again. And I'm telling you I don't have enough faith. And Jesus points to a tree and says, you don't need a whole lot of faith. What? If you just had the faith of the size of a single tiny mustard seed, you could say to this huge tree, pull up your roots and replant yourself in the sea, and it would fly through the sky and do what you said. So even a little faith can accomplish impossible things. You get what Jesus is saying? You get it? I know that you don't feel like you have the faith for this, so I'm going to tell you something difficult. How about you tell that tree to just get up and go plant itself in the sea and see what happens? Because if you had even a little bit of faith, that, as impossible as it seems, could be possible. Is Jesus saying that great faith can perform supernatural acts? Here's one of the things that bothers me anymore, and I wish it didn't. I wish I could go back, but I can't. Does God have to do supernatural things to be God? Is it important? Did you know that the magician is one archetype of God and who God is in our lives? And it's important. But Jesus starts talking about the lover God, and it upsets people. Well, I like that bush story. You think God can do that? I like that parting of the Red Sea. I said this to someone yesterday, and I hope they understood what I meant. If you get stuck on the parting of the Red Sea, and that's all you hear in the story, you might have missed the point of the story. It was about a little bit more than just this great big act. But man, if you just had a little bit of faith, you could do impossible things. You mean like forgive people? Well, let's see. You have a servant, say he's been out plowing a field, or taking care of the sheep, and he comes in hot and sweaty from his work. Are you going to say, you poor thing, come and sit down right away? Well, that's what we think Jesus would say. It's what I think I would say. But no, I may even be sarcastic. I don't like to read sarcasm into Jesus. Of course not. Wouldn't you be more likely to say, first cook my supper, set the table, and then after I've eaten, you can get something to eat and drink for yourself? Wow. I don't do this, do I? Can I tell this story? The kid's gone? We talking about archetypes again. You know, when my children were little and I worked all day and my wife stayed at home, she was the mommy archetype. Then I came home at the end of the day, you know, the king of the castle, the prince, the breadwinner, the ego guy walks through the door. The king is home. Now mama need to change from mama archetype to sexy mama archetype. She used to tell me over and over, I can't change hats like that. And I'm like, well, I don't know why not. I came in with my hat on. Would you say, sit and eat first? Or would you say to your servant, man, this is really hurting, isn't it? What kind of people are we? Cook my supper, set the table. After I've eaten, get yourself something to drink. And after your servant has done everything you told him to do, are you going to make a big deal out of it and thank him? I don't think so. That's what it says right here in parentheses. I don't think so. Now, oh boy, but if Jesus were here, we'd be going, that's what I do. Yeah. Jesus is like, no, I don't think you would. Now apply this situation to yourselves. When you've done everything I'm telling you to do, just say this. We're servants, unworthy of extra consideration or thanks. We're just doing our duty. You know, life is hard. Man, it's hard. And we don't just want to run at the door. We want some guarantees from God. We wrap it all up in our prayer life and tell God in prayer how God needs to order the universe and what things would make us happy if God would just do those things. And rarely do we sit and say to God, you know, today your grace is sufficient. It is well. Oh, I'm not talking about being the kind of people who sit around and say, nothing can change. I'm just going to be as existential as I have to be and say, it doesn't matter why I put out the effort. That's not what I'm saying. There is a time to be up working, and there is a time to be prostrate before the Lord. Prostrate. I always get those two words mixed up. That's dangerous for a guy who walks around with one of those things. When have you wanted to say, God, I'm not just a doormat. God, this thing that has been eating me alive, this addiction, this illness, this depression, this greed, this thing that has been consuming me, and there are people who are flaunting it in front of me, and Lord, I cannot take it anymore. God, I'm tired of forgiveness. I need healing. I want to be something that I'm not. Move me on. And Jesus is saying, and you're having trouble forgiving one another, and you really want to be patted on the back when you get those little things right, it is hard. I wish Jesus would finish the story, because you know there's another piece to it. There's another piece where God wraps up the brokenhearted and the wounded. There's another piece where God pulls you closer to God's own breast and says, you're my child. The path to getting there is not a path of acquisition and achievement. It is a path of letting go. It is not a path of more me, see how good I did. It is a path of please help me. This is hard. When we call upon the Lord, hear this. Faith comes as a gift. You have it. Faith comes as a gift before you even ask. And it only takes a little bit and impossible things begin to happen. If you can't hear it from me, listen for it from our children and our grandchildren. They are not as wounded and as jaded yet as perhaps we are. And may Jesus help us. Pray with me, please.